Bartkus, the Executive Director of the Ridgefield Historical Society. Today is Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. Welcome to the Historical Society Scott House and the Ridgefield History Club. We're so happy to have you all with us today. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Historical is dedicated to collecting and preserving and sharing the history of Ridgefield. And we encourage all of you to get involved in the work that we do. We're always looking for new members and volunteers to help us preserve the history of Ridgefield. We have a really great topic that we're going to be talking about today. It is Historic Trees of Ridgefield, and we have a very special guest with us, Tom McManus. Tom is the chair of the Ridgefield Tree Committee, and he is also the treasurer of the Graveyard Restoration Committee, and he is very involved in historic preservation and environmental issues here in Ridgefield, and we're so grateful to have you with us today, Tom. Thank you so much,
It's great
and
to be
I'm
here.
going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. It's very nice to be with you, everyone. This is the first time I've made this presentation, so I hope it's in the right order. But so I want to start off by saying I couldn't have done this without Jack, the historian, Ridgefield historian, and all the different books and posts, etc., that he's done on old Ridgefield. This is a book that he published, and you can see these beautiful elm trees that would have lined Main Street back more than 100 years ago. Unfortunately, the elms got attacked by a bug, and most of them have died, but not all. And we're going to point out to you some of the elms that you could walk by right on Main Street. You just want to know where they are, and you just want to keep it and appreciate them, because they are much more rare than they were before. Looking at it from the perspective of trees, though, one of the problems might have been that there were too many elms, and that we were depending on too many elms. And when the elms got that disease, they all went, or practically all of them went. And after that, many sugar maples were planted along Main Street. And now we're starting to see that the sugar maples are suffering, mostly, I think, because of the salt. When we were younger, right, and the snow would come, the highway department had no idea when the snow would end. They had no idea when it. Nowadays, you know 3 or 4 days ahead of time when it's going to snow and when it's going to start, etc. So the highway department, very often, they go out with these tanks and they spray salt, liquid salt, on the roads, and that liquid salt, sometimes we get the snow that we expected and sometimes we don't, but eventually the snow is going to melt anyway. And what happens is that salt mixes with the water and the trees drink it up, and the sugar maples don't like that. So we're looking to plant more variety rather than the less variety that Ridgefield had in its early days. I also want to say thank you to someone I don't know. Michael Scott has posted many photographs that he's taken more recently than some of the older pictures that you've seen. He had a post, I think it was his grandparents, who spent their honeymoon in Ridgefield in 1929. So I found some very interesting photographs from him. And another source I've used is Google Street View, so that you can see what something may have looked like 20 years ago and what it looks like in recent years, and compare them. A timeline, I think, might be handy just to give us some context here. Ridgefield, founded 1708. Many people don't know that there was a nursery in Long Island that was importing trees from Europe as early as 1767. Right, coming over on those old ships. The war, obviously, 1775 to 83. I think it's interesting that we're celebrating the Declaration of Independence, but maybe we should be celebrating the ultimate victory. The first American ship to arrive in China was 1765, so we started trading with China long before we started trading with Japan. But some of those trees that came to Ridgefield came from China, and we'll talk about that. Trade began with Japan in 1884, and then transportation was important too, because in the early days, to get from Asia to Ridgefield, you would have had to go down around the what is the Cape of Good Horn, right down around the bottom of South America. I think, speaking of which, I think Seth Lowe Pierpont, who you probably all know, the park named after Seth Lowe Pierpont, etc., his house up there on the top of the hill. The Lowes and the Pierponts were both involved in importing from Asia, and back in the days when the ships had to go around the Cape of Good Horn. Transcontinental Railroad allowed trees to come from Asia to San Francisco, and then to come by train, and eventually you had the first cherry trees planted in Washington, D.C. in 1914. That's because somewhere in there in the late 1800s, I think that Japan started to trade with the United States as well. So it was quite a bit after China was. And some of the trees that you see around are from Japan as well. So the first cherry trees in D.C. in 1914, and then the Panama Canal opened, which also hastened some of the heavier loads that would be coming from Asia to the East Coast. This is a postcard that Jack has shared. It's a photograph, I believe, that's been colorized. It was popular back in those days. And this shows East Ridge. This would be Governor Street, I guess. And this photo was taken from, I guess this photo was probably taken from somewhere around where the Ridgefield Visiting Nurse Association, maybe just a little bit higher up the hill there. So you could see our modern police officers' headquarters here, and some of the other notable things. And you'd see what that would have looked like. It was it had been cleared. I mean, when people first arrived in Ridgefield, it was probably entirely forest, maybe some meadows here and there, but this was probably cleared. You could find lots of photographs from that era where you see an entire hillside, and you could see that it was basically just all of the trees were removed. A lot of it for firewood and construction and things like that. But eventually, we made meadows where livestock could feed, etc. And you could see that these probably apple trees were planted. Trees were important for food products, etc. Fruit would be very important, but other things as well. And here's an important moment that we talked about in terms of transportation of trees from the West Coast to the East Coast. And here's an old photograph of a cherry tree right there in the basin there in Washington, D.C., and one that I took this past spring. I lucked out and got there right at the peak of the cherry blossom season. You could see that this tree was grafted quite some time ago. It's probably one of the original cherry trees that was planted in 1914. So, a history of trees in Ridgefield really can't be told without knowing about the Outpost Farm. And Colonel Lewis Conley, he acquired farmland along Bennis Farm Road, and he built a mansion. I'm not sure where he originally got his money, but that's quite a house. The house is no longer there. I think there are quite a few people who may have, or older people here in Ridgefield that may have actually been there when it became a restaurant and a slight resort after Mr. Conley was gone. But this is the front of his mansion was actually facing east, and the view from there would have been something like this. So down here you've got Route 7 and BMW, etc. And you've got a beautiful eastern view. If you were to go there now, this whole area is completely is all volunteer trees and a lot of difficult to walk through there because there are not really any paths at all. But you can find some of the specimen trees that were planted at the time. You just have to trudge through some pretty tough underbrush to get to see that. This is the view that you can get today if you were to walk up the trail from the parking area down in Bennett's Farm Road. If you walk up to the top of the trail, you could see where this is the back of the mansion here, and not really certain, but this could possibly be the same tree when it was there at his mansion and what it looks like today. And you can see again, we're looking to the east at that point. A very notable building in Ridgefield, right at the intersection of Route 7 and Route 35. This was built as the Outpost Nursery, which was Colonel Conley's business, or one of his businesses, one of his interests. I guess another one was dogs, which I know very little about. But halfway between his home and Ridgefield's Nursery Road is this recognizable building, which was the headquarters for Outpost Nursery. Now, when I drive around, I love to take roads named Nursery Road or Nursery Street or Nursery Lane, etc. And why? Because if you look carefully, you could see a lot of trees that they'd never sold. And these were specimen trees that they imported or that they grew. And so we have a Nursery Road in Ridgefield. There's one in New Canaan. It's actually the same road between New Canaan and Norwalk. It's connected. It's just called Nursery Street in Norwalk. Nursery Lane in Rye. Nursery Road in Tuxedo, New York. And nurseries have been converted into golf courses as well. Anybody want to take a guess? Augusta National Golf Course was converted from a nursery into a golf course rather quickly in the early 1930s. I played golf one time with someone at a course in Bronxville called Siwanoy, and many golf courses, the trees looking just absolutely beautiful. And one of the reasons is, on a golf course, they take pretty good care of their trees too, because they're specimens, and they, apparently, President Eisenhower actually had one of the trees at Augusta National taken down because he kept on driving his ball into the tree. Get rid of that tree. So that's something to keep in mind if you love trees. If you're allowed to walk on golf courses during the winter when people aren't playing, it's an absolutely nice place to go. So the Panama Canal opened in 1914, as I pointed out, and the Outpost Nursery grew, imported, sold, and planted notable trees. Many of these are still noticeable, not just in Ridgefield, but you could see Outpost Nursery was actually responsible for bringing trees into the New York World's Fair in 1939. And there are lots of estates around Ridgefield where the owners appreciated the trees. You could see that Mr. Lewis enjoyed his trees. I think Mrs. Lewis may have really enjoyed her gardens, but that's a postcard from around the time that Lewises were living on Manor Lane, Manor Road. This is the entrance. This is from Google Street View. This is very recent, and this is what it would have looked like 100 years ago. Now, the reason I point this out is that if you go into Manor Lane or Lewis Drive, which begins at the bend in off of High Ridge, Lewis Drive, and that's one of the back entrances. But I guess this was several hundred acres. But if you visit there, you'll see lots of specimen trees and some unusual trees that Mr. Lewis had planted as part of his estate. Now, I'd like to talk about a tree that came from China. It's called the ginkgo biloba, and you may have heard some people actually use this as a medicinal plant. So there's some links here in my presentation, and you can research this very unusual shaped leaf here, a very strong leaf, not very nice fall color. It's just turned yellow, but it's a very it's a very strong tree, as you'll see if you look at a couple of the ginkgos around Ridgefield. They're easy to find. They're not numerous, but I can show you a place where you can find several of them. I've got them numbered 1, 2, and 3 here, but this isn't how I would go to look at them. This one is on High Ridge Avenue, on the south side of High Ridge Avenue. This one is behind St. Stephen's, and this one here is near the fountain on Main Street. I would probably, I don't know if I've got the actual route here. I would probably park at Jesse Lee, walk up King Lane to High Ridge, and then down High Ridge. You'd be walking south on High Ridge, and you'd see the first one here. And then you could go a little bit farther, Parley Lane, come over to the fountain, and this tree is just a little bit south of the fountain. It's on private property, but it's viewable from the road. And then walk along Main Street up to St. Stephen's. And you'd actually be able to, across the street from St. Stephen's, there was a tree that was planted more recently that's a younger one. We'll show you those. Here's your walk down High Ridge. This is another postcard that was a photograph that was colorized. And right about here, the sidewalk isn't there anymore, but if you're right about here and you look to your right, this is what you see. Or this is what you would have seen at the time that the postcard was made, the time the photograph was made. This house is no longer there. It's been replaced. The house is actually behind on this photo. But that tree is that tree. Okay? That's the ginkgo tree that would have been there 100 years ago, and this is what it looks like today.
Tom, do I remember with ginkgos you need the male and the female in order for them to produce the those stinky things that fall down?
Yes, well, I was going to mention that.
Oh, sorry.
But the female ginkgo trees are not, they're the ones that don't have an aroma that you'd appreciate. But these are all male trees. Some trees are both male and female. There's a horse chestnut on High Ridge, right near the corner where it becomes Gilbert. It's in flower right now. It's very nice to appreciate that. It has these huge cone-shaped, like an upside-down ice cream cone. They're huge flowers. And apparently, and I'm no specialist on this, but apparently the flowers at the top of the tree are male, and the flowers that are at the bottom of the tree are female. So the gender of trees is sometimes important. I'm not really a scientist, but here's the second ginkgo tree, and this is also Google Street Views. Somebody could easily get a better picture of this, but it's viewable from the sidewalk, which is right in front of the driveway here. So you don't have to go onto the property, and I'd say don't trespass and don't try and look at the tree while you're driving. Here's the third large ginkgo. It's just a little bit north of the St. Stephen's Church, and I guess this is their auxiliary building where I guess some of the presentations for the Historical Society are done there. And the interesting thing about these three trees is I've measured them all, and they're all within an inch of diameter. They're all the same size. So I suspect that they probably were planted by Mr. Conley's company, Outpost Nursery. They were probably purchased maybe even as part of the same batch. And I haven't been able to figure out exactly what year that is, because the science of trying to determine the age of a tree it depends a lot on where it's planted. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Interestingly, now, if you were standing here on the sidewalk and you turned around, you'd see another younger ginkgo tree that was probably, I'm gonna guess it was probably planted by John Pinchbeck before the most recent renovation of Main Street. But it's healthy and seems to be growing nicely. It's a very popular street tree if you look in other cities, you look at Philadelphia, et cetera, et cetera. The reason it's a popular street tree is it's very, very resilient. They don't seem to suffer any diseases that we know of, or other problems as well. They handle, drought extremely well. So here's an old photograph, an aerial photograph of Chucoli Field there. This would be Governor Street coming up along here. The back of the school building. The baseball field is still here. The baseball field got to be famous for another historical event that I won't talk about. But over here, labeled number 3, is a tree, which is still there today. You've got the tennis court behind it. This photograph is taken from the ball field. It's a beautiful white oak tree. It's probably 7 feet in diameter.
Do you know approximately how old?
Well, that would be the question, okay? Because here's another white oak tree. This is the charter oak, which is up near Hartford. It fell down in a storm in 1856, and it was estimated that it was several hundred years old when it failed, when the tree failed. And since then, the charter oak is so important to the state of Connecticut that the state of Connecticut has actually encouraged individual towns to plant white oak trees in remembrance of this tree. I think the last time that the state of Connecticut did that was in 1902. But this painting was done just a year after the tree fell down. This was a massive tree. Now, the reason it's difficult, well, one of the reasons that it's difficult to figure out the age of a tree, the easiest way is if you can cut it and you can count those rings. Those rings are indeed, each year a tree puts on another ring. But depends on the conditions around the tree as to some years there's a lot of rain and it can add a lot of growth, and other years there's a drought. But it also depends on where the tree has been planted. So a tree in the forest would have to compete against the other trees, is going to have to grow high, and so the energy that the tree is able to get from the sun and the water, etc., and it's trying to grow high, you're going to see not very many branches are going to do well in the understory, right? Because it's going to need access to the sun. Whereas this tree, apparently, and the tree, sorry, we'll go back here, and the tree that we looked at here, you can see that this tree in Ridgefield never really had that much competition. And so it was taking all the energy that it was getting from the sun, and it was getting wider. So 7 feet diameter. So the similarity here is, this is, I don't know, I haven't measured exactly how high this is, but as far as I can tell, this tree has never really had any competition like it would have had in the forest. And therefore, it is probably has a fatter trunk, and it's not necessarily growing as high as it might need to in the forest. Here's another example of a white oak tree. This is the Bedford oak. I was lucky enough to grow up about a mile away from this tree. This is Route 22, and Route 22 is a very, very old road. Okay, soldiers marched to Canada during the French and Indian War along Route 22. Goes from the Bronx all the way up to Canada, and it's right there. Bedford Golf and Tennis Club is on the other side of this. It's easily viewable, this gorgeous tree. And once again, you see a lot of girth. It doesn't really have to have much height because it doesn't compete. Here is a famous tree in Ridgefield. You've seen that photograph of the artists. This is the Guild of Artists. This is the other side of that tree. This is a Norway maple. It's considered to be a state champion in terms of its size, and to be qualified as a state champion, it's going to have to be measured not just around the trunk, but they're going to measure the height, they're going to measure the width of the canopy, etc. And with some calculations, they'll decide that that's quite possibly the oldest living Norway maple that's been recognized in the state of Connecticut. Unfortunately, it's an invasive species. What makes it invasive is that many of these trees, when they do go in the forest, they are growing tall, and they have a very dense canopy, very large leaves, not very attractive fall color. They all turn yellow. It's unlike a sugar maple where you get orange leaves, and then red maples you get red leaves. Those are both native species. But the very tall trees in the forest, they grow so tall, they're very dense canopy. They create so much shade in the forest that it makes it difficult for the native understory plants to grow. And what manages to grow with that kind of shade are other invasives like barberry, like burning bush, etc. And we're all trying to work hard to get rid of those invasive species. So we're not planting. You can't buy a Norway maple if you want to in many states now because it's considered to be an invasive. Now, so we had the question about how do you estimate the age of trees? I was on a tree walk recently at Highgate in Newtown, and we found a white oak. It was probably about maybe 2 feet diameter, and the fellow who turned out to be a PhD in dendrology and understands probably more about trees than I would learn in 10 lifetimes, he actually had a core, and that's the other way you can measure the age of a live tree, is you actually drive a core into the tree and pull out a sample, which the tree will heal itself in no time. Pull out a sample, go into the laboratory with your microscope, and actually look at each of the rings. And by understanding what the weather was in the past, they can say, this is 1957 when we had drought, right? This is 1968 when we had gypsy moths, etc. This is a rough way of estimating the age of a tree might be. You would measure the diameter, and then you would multiply by. But it's going to be very different whether it's out in the open or in a forest than other conditions that it might have taken place. So the next section of the presentation is comparing the recent past with the current situation that we have in Ridgefield. And if you look at and see how much has changed around town, you can see why our tree committee, with significant contributions from individual donors, including through the Rotary Club, which was mentioned before. But we also need to get permission from property owners, which might include the state of Connecticut on the state highways. Main Street is a state highway, right? Branchville Road is a state highway. Any planting that we'd want to do along the state highways, we have to get permission from the state. It's not that it's impossible to get that permission. It just takes time, a lot of paperwork. They have to inspect the locations, etc. Recently, we've got another allocation of funds from the town, and we've always been getting great help and advice from our tree warden, Steve Lavatori, but we're planning to plant more trees. So looking at then and now, this would have been then. By the way, looking at this photograph, do you know where the photographer was standing? This is the old schoolhouse.
Cemetery?
He's standing, but I think he's standing right there on Settler's Rock. Right there on Settler's Rock. And he's looking down on North Salem Road, and look at the size of that tree there. And the tree has had a limb taken off once in a while because of the wires going by, etc. But if you look at that tree today, gone. And if you were to look at photographs, this isn't even that long ago. This is maybe 10, 15 years ago. I don't know. I don't actually have a date on that photograph. But if you were to compare some of those older views with the new ones, you'll see how many trees that we've lost around town. And many of the old photographs that Jack has shared as well as a lot of shade over Main Street. And here's a photograph from 1929. This was a black and white photograph that, has anybody used AI to sharpen some? Take your old family photographs, right? Scan them before they deteriorate anymore. Scan them. Use AI. AI can sharpen them, increase the contrast. AI can save that photograph because as it was printed on the paper and the chemicals that were used to make that photograph, they're gradually getting worse over time. Scan them now, right? And then you can upload the image, and the artificial intelligence can actually sharpen that and increase the contrast. Add some subtle color. But you could see, somebody was thinking about the future here, right?
Yeah.
That's a brand new tree that had been planted in 1929. And this is the elms, right, Jack? So we're looking north on Main Street from in front of Ballard Park, okay? And you can see the elms, and apparently this is where that couple spent their honeymoon, or part of their honeymoon. Now you see some elms here, you see some maples, etc. There was a little bit of variety there, but here's another photograph of the elms. This was just several years ago before the renovation. A couple of large trees here, and so we're seeing 3 large trees here, and there are some plantings. So this tree hopefully will eventually grow, but we'd like to recognize that there's been a significant change in our canopy over the past 10 or 20 years. This isn't so much about the canopy, but this was also from that same set of photographs in 1929. Hawley House, we'll go counterclockwise here, 1929. This was sometime in the 1980s. The reason this was from a postcard of Ridgefield. And notice how this tree is tilting a little bit to the right. Here you are in 2019, that's the same tree. Okay, you see it's kind of tilting a little bit to the right. That's been removed since then. The property owner, I think, had some nice trees planted there in 2023, and they will eventually be providing a lot more shade along Main Street as you enjoy your walks. Before the library project, what was the name of that movie I saw when I was a kid? Fantastic Voyage. Anybody see that? These people got shrunk down into this little, they were injected into somebody to try and kill some kind of cancer inside a patient. Well, anyway, the old movie theater, at this point, I guess it was a bank, right? And look at the large trees that we had along Prospect Street at the time. Now, with the change, and part of this, I'm not saying this has to do with the library project necessarily, because we're trying to widen the roads a little bit and make it a little bit easier for traffic. We've got tractor trailers going up and down this road now to get to the lumber store. But with the new theater, right, and the new library project that was done at the same time, we now have a narrower strip to plant, and we have some new plantings, but it will take a while before they create anything quite close to the shade and other benefits that large trees provide us. This was also a photograph from that 1929 honeymoon photographs of St. Stephen's Church. And I've numbered these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees around St. Stephen's. So there's this same photograph, just by comparison. Here it is 2006, we still have one, right? And 2023, no trees in front of the church. Does anybody remember the Save the Elm?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is that elm at directly across from Prospect. You see down the hill there. The library would be on your left. And this is the one where the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the removal of the tree to improve the traffic around that intersection. And there were people who, practically tied themselves to the tree to prevent that from happening. There were T-shirts sold, and this was straight out of an article in the New York Times. And we can find the rest of the article for you. It's quite interesting. but it's that long ago. So we'll come back to that corner in just a second. Here's a beautiful elm along the south side of Main Street. And we want to point out that there are still elms. This is right here next to the Ridgefield High School at the intersection of Ridgebury Road and North Salem Road. You can see a beautiful elm tree. There's one on Mapleshade Road. There's one on King Lane. There's one right by the monument. This is an American elm tree. But there are far fewer, and they're still susceptible to an attack by these bugs. The front entrance to the library before the renovation was done. The same area, the library's here. That's that old intersection. And what it looks like today. So we've lost a lot of trees along Prospect. We've lost trees along Main Street because of the widening project that was done a couple of years ago. This is not a tree that's missing. I see people often say nice things about these trees. They love the shape of the trees that are down by Starbucks, etc. So here you can see what a tree would have looked like in the winter. This tree is still alive. It's a beautiful tree. You see them around town. It's not a native tree. Okay, it's a hybrid between a native tree, a sycamore, and a plane tree that came from Eastern Europe, as a matter of fact. And it has nothing really to do with London except the fact that they planted them in London, and this was the only tree that survived the Industrial Revolution in London. If you can remember what the photographs of London would have been in the 1800s when they were burning all that coal to create all that iron, etc. This is the tree that survived, and they are planted around town. It was a favorite of planting of John Pinchbeck, our former tree warden, and you can see them. They look very much like a sycamore tree. They're a hybrid, half native tree and half non-native. And here's some native trees to consider in 2026. We are planting entirely, whatever we're planting native trees. So these are some that you might want to consider depending on what characteristics you'd be looking for. Fall color, river birch. It was one of the species that the tree committee gave away at our meeting on Saturday. We have tiny little trees. You could barely call them a tree, but they were potted nicely, and they have buds coming out, and you can plant them. And you don't need to take great care of them. Just make sure they have water for a while, and they'll grow. So that is the last slide of my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions that people might have.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned the other day at the Valley Park presentation that certain people have a fear of trees falling down. I can't remember what it was called, whether it was you or whether it was the DEEP representative, but that has contributed to a lot of the big trees being taken down because people are afraid of branches falling down. Do you remember what that was? That you? And do you remember what that word was, or was that someone else?
Well,
It was
I
like
don't
an
think that
official
was,
thing, like
yeah.
fear of falling trees.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a name, if it's a recognizable disease or something like that, but we have seen trees fall, and I can remember a storm that we had in Ridgefield probably about 2004, and then we also had what was it called, Isaias, the tropical storm as recently as 2020. The problem with these hurricanes and tropical storms is that it's an intense low pressure system, and high pressure, the winds turn clockwise, right? In low pressure, the winds go counterclockwise, and you combine that different direction of the wind with an intense rainfall, and trees can literally get, what are healthy trees can literally get pushed over. So during that storm back in the, I'd say it was probably almost 20 years ago now, there were quite a few trees that came down on Main Street. There were lots of other trees that you could see trees fell on houses, etc., right? And that's because you get a tremendous amount of rain, which softens up the ground around the tree, and then you get a very strong wind from the direction that the tree is never accustomed to getting that wind, and it will blow over in that from east to west. And when you look at the damage from those storms, and Jack has some great pictures of blizzards and other, there was a time when there was a tornado that came right through Ridgefield, and the photographs of the tree damage that are on the old Ridgefield website, I didn't include them here, but it's a real possibility, and it's it could be a perfectly healthy tree, and if it comes in. And tropical storms don't come during the winter, right? They come during the fall, right? When the trees still have all the leaves on them, and it can get to be a great big sail. So
There was white birch trees in front of the Unity Gym, or in back of the Unity Gym, and in the winter they would, with the snow and the ice, they would go completely over. They would go,
right.
yeah, so you could walk through them.
Yes, well, there are trees too, when they have leaves and you get early snow or something like that, they'll bend over, and sometimes they'll break and sometimes they'll just bend right back.
In the 1970s, at Main Street in King Lane, during a rather ordinary thunderstorm, a limb fell off of one of the huge, I assume, maples there, and it hit a car and severely injured a young woman who was paralyzed or partially paralyzed for life by that limb. And it scared a lot of people, and there was a lot of tree work done after that happened. It was just an ordinary storm, it wasn't a hurricane.
Well, I remember hearing a story from a friend about a school bus up on Ridgebury Road or somewhere up in the Ridgebury area, that during a storm, a tree came down and hit the bus, and the bus driver, a woman, was very interested in making sure that she was taking care of those kids. That ran through the rain and knocked on the door of a house and got into the house. I actually know one of the girls who was on that bus. Yes.
This was not a living tree, but I do a lot of hiking around town, and I was up in Twixt Hills, and I was walking down a trail a couple of years ago, and it wasn't, it was a beautiful day like this. It wasn't too windy or anything, and then all of a sudden I hear in front of me a crack, 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 and then a huge tree. It must have been 1.5 feet in diameter. Came down, and the top of the tree just was along the edge of the trail. So if I had been there, I might have been brushed by it, but whatever. And a tree falls in the woods, you do hear a sound. So it was.
To be there to
I
hear
just
it.
happened to be there at that time, and it was pretty neat.
Neat.
I was not afraid, I don't have that fear of trees falling on me, but it was good.
We were on the Merritt Parkway just last night, and all of a sudden, there's police cars, a tree had fallen down.
It was windy.
Well, that recent widening of Merritt Parkway has resulted in a narrowing of the center median in some places. But if you notice, the state has actually planted new trees there. There are hundreds of them in that area. You know, I guess between, at least where I recognize it be, say, between New Canaan and New Haven.
Tom, do you find that there's a progression of trees that are no longer living well here because of the change in temperature?
Yeah, I guess I'd turn that around a little bit and say that one of the things I'm considering, right, is what trees that aren't really common here, but you can find in, say, Philadelphia or Washington, D.C., that we can anticipate might be more
I see red
appropriate.
bud, yeah.
Yeah, might be more appropriate for here than they'd be considered. One of them, what I saw, what was a very impressive tree is called a willow oak. It's a native tree, and its region it does well. I mean, I saw them all around Philadelphia. I saw them in Washington, D.C., and I've read that they do well in Long Island and Cape Cod. But I'm still wondering whether the 800 feet of elevation above sea level that we have and the distance from the Long Island Sound might still make it that the winters would be a little bit tough on that tree. But it's certainly something that we're considering. We're looking for all of those, and that's been happening over time as the climate changes because of all sorts of things out of our control. We're trying to anticipate what might be the best trees to be planting today.
I'm noticing that a lot of the big old beech trees are now dying. What's going on with them? Is it just age-wise, or?
No, there's a beech leaf disease. It's called BLD, beech leaf disease. And if you look at the leaf and you hold it up to the sun, you can actually see dark stripes in the leaf, and that those stripes are actually worms that are in between the top of the leaf and the bottom of the leaf. And the only thing that can be done right now is to fertilize those trees. I mean, they're literally using fertilizer to give the tree more energy to try and resist those. People have tried all sorts of things, as spraying the leaves, etc., like that. But it's actually right now it's either a root drench or a bark drench with this fertilizer that seems to be. As I go to Ballard Park just this spring, it looks like they're better. Those beech trees in Ballard Park are better this year than they were last year. And I hope that trend will continue because they're amazing trees.
Right.
Unfortunately, the beech tree is a native tree and is very common in the forest. And the ones that are suffering the most are the ones that can't be treated, right, because they're in the forest. And the native trees are, and this disease, just like a lot of other diseases, it came from the Midwest. I think a lot of it has to do with shipping, Great Lakes shipping. The same thing happened with the emerald ash borer. The bugs come in through the shipping pallets. You know, that's cheap wood that could easily have bugs embedded in it, and you combine those bugs with species that have never come in contact with those before, and suddenly you've got something like the emerald ash borer or some of these things. If you look at that map of where beech leaf disease was first recognized, you'd see it started in the Midwest and has been moving east towards the Northeast. And you can actually see, just by looking at when the articles hit the newspapers, right? People were talking about beech leaf disease in New York, in the New York area and in Ridgefield a couple of years before they had an article in the Boston Globe about it, right? And so it's moving,
Yeah, my
right?
goodness.
And unfortunately, it's a very important native tree, the beech. Yes.
Have you ever taken a good look at our oak tree in the back? And it's such a beautiful tree. Like, what kind of oak is it? And it's pretty notable because it's so huge.
Yes, well, it looks to me like the lobes on the leaves are rounded, and therefore it's in the white oak family and not the red oak family. The easiest thing to do when you look at the oak leaf looks very similar, but when you look at those lobes, if it's sharp on the end and it's in the red oak family, it could still be one of a number of different species, and that's a very, very common. In Ballard Park, you'll find examples of both the white oak, which that one might be, and also red oak. And as I mentioned before, it's a whole wide range of oaks. There's something called a bur oak, which is a member of the white oak family. There's, I mentioned before, the willow oak, where the leaves, again, the same basic shape, but when you look at when you look a little bit closer, you can determine what that is. I'm not quite, I'm not an arborist yet, but working on it, and I could probably, it's a lot easier with leaves. In wintertime, you have to look at just the bark.
So related to that, the Lewisboro Plant Club had a native tree sale. So for $1, you could buy these little trees. So in addition to the river birch that I've already planted, I have a number of little native. I have a black oak, a white oak, a bur oak, and then a bunch of other smaller things. But the idea of planting a tree in the middle of an open space that is going to take 25 years to become full size seems a bit flawed. So I was thinking of just putting it in our little forest, but you're saying they won't do well. So is that a consideration when you're planting the trees that are going along the state road? Like, how long is it going to take to get to be of a reasonable size? Because these are, right now, they're like this big.
Yes, we're not planting any.
They're for future generations,
We're not
clearly, not for me.
Sometimes they call these tiny trees whips. Okay, and you get 25 in a package for for $15 or something like that, and you have to take them apart and you have to pot them first, right? Or you could, if you're quick, you can go plant them right away. But what's that old Greek proverb, right? The sign of a good community is when old people plant trees that they know they'll never enjoy the shade of, right?
Right.
Okay,
right.
so we're planting for the next generation.
Yeah.
The trees that we've been buying for Main Street, and I think probably the best size would be something between 2 and 3 or 4 inch caliber. So something about that.
That's clearly not
About
what
that size. And they're heavy enough
grandchildren trees.
because they come in what we call ball and burlap, right? So there's a sufficient amount of root that comes with them. It's probably not all of the root that the tree has generated by that time, but it's a sufficient amount of root, and it's heavy. It's several hundred pounds, right? So just they have to put them on the back of the truck with a forklift. Sometimes we could build a little cushion and try and drag them off the truck and land them on the cushion, then sort of roll them over onto the ground. There was a photograph of some of the large trees that Outpost Nursery was moving. Large trees are great for people who want to have a large tree immediately, but large trees actually take more time to reestablish because a tree that with a caliper that big, for example, you could still have a big root ball, but the tree is going to take a couple of years just to get accommodated to that new location. The trees that are 2 to 4 inch caliper will get established much more quickly, and then you'll see that once they get comfortable with the place and they get the right nutrients and water, etc., they're going to really start to grow.
Tom, this was so fascinating. How did you first get interested in trees, and do you have a favorite tree in Ridgefield?
Oh, well, I've always been interested in trees. Well, I grew up in Bedford, and the plot where we lived, it was 9 acres. It was originally part of a big farm, and it was, like a lot of other things, was completely neglected during World War II. And there were volunteer trees that had grown, and my mom wanted to get rid of some of the trees. And so when I was 14 or so, she rented me a chainsaw, and luckily I read books, So, she just said, here, he thinks I'm going to use it, you do it. Anyway, so it started with chainsaw and understanding what you needed to know about trees and about wood, etc. And then we also were planting trees. So the reason we wanted to take some of the volunteer trees out is that it was an old apple orchard, right? And so part of it was just removing volunteer trees to make room for the specimen trees of the time. And over the years, I've just been fascinated by trees. And then nowadays, we recognize this problem with over-dependence on individual species, and that we want to try and go back to a little bit more variety. But this isn't like planting trees in the forest, right? The considerations that we have when we plant along roads is we have to consider the electric wires, we have to consider the gas main, we have to consider the underground cable TV cables that are going all over the place. So, and we have to consider the line of sight. We have to make sure that the road signs aren't going to be interfered with by the trees, etc. So there's a lot of considerations for planting in rights of way. So finding the right species, finding the right place, and trying to anticipate what this is going to look like in 50 years is, it's a little complicated, and that's where I think that maybe some of my skills are well applied.
Well, thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, and I think we could wrap up here. Thank you so much, Tom. This was so interesting.
Thank you. Thanks so
To remind everyone that our next History Club gathering is a little bit different. We're calling it Ridgefield History Club on the Road. So we're not going to meet here next month. We're going to the Ridgefield Guild of Artists to learn about their history and the artists that form that organization. So please join us on Tuesday, June 16th at 10 o'clock at the Guild. And I also want to mention a couple of our other upcoming programs and things that are happening. Of course, this is a really busy time of the year. We're going to see all of you at the Memorial Day Parade this coming Monday to honor those Ridgefielders who made the ultimate sacrifice. And last Sunday's at the schoolhouse. Jack and Sally will have the Peter Parley Schoolhouse open on Sunday, May 31st from 1 to 4. This is our season opening, so please stop by. And we'll be at the Ridgefield Town Party on May 31st at Veterans Park. Also, Ridgefield Pride in the Park on June 6th. And we have some really great programs coming up. We're calling it our Mad for Modern series. So we have a garden walk and a house talk taking place at the Gurley Estate here in Ridgefield. It's a Japanese-influenced modern. This is going to take place on Sunday, June 7th from 3 to 6 in the afternoon. And I hope you'll be able to join us for that. And also another great program called Cocktails and the Collector coming up on Thursday, June 25th. This is a joint fundraiser of the Guild and the Historical Society. We'll have pieces of modern artwork on display, and they'll be available for bidding. It's an auction and a cocktail party, and it will be a lot of fun. More details are on our website, ridgefieldhistoricalsociety.org. And until we see you next month, I hope all is well, and we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us.